This is Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing. You are watching Sporting Icons. You don't need to be anywhere else.
Now, I'm sure like most of you, you've sat down with this absolutely scorching British weather and watched the Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn press conference. I enjoyed it. I really did from beginning to end. There's a lot of good nuggets, a lot of good headliners, if you like, that you could certainly mention. But as far as the press conference went, very, very similar, if you like, to their fathers, where Nigel Benn, he was pretty much the antagonist. He was the one goading and looking for an argument with Chris Eubank, now known as Senior. Much like with this one, Conor Benn was more argumentative than Chris Eubank Jr. Chris Eubank Jr. was being cool and calm. Now, he said a lot of good quotes, Chris Eubank Jr., he really did, which we're going to get into some of them. Now, of what I can tell, the weight limit for this fight is 157 pounds. So that means that Conor Benn is going to be moving up a weight class and a half. They're bidding it as he's moving up 2 weight classes, but he's not. He's moving up a weight and a half is what he's doing. 1 weight class will be 154 pounds. 2 weight classes would be 160, but this is going to be 157. So he's kind of halfway in between. But if I understood it correctly, it appears that the rehydration is 162, a maximum 162. Now, firstly, by the way, before I go too much further, the jacket that Chris Eubank Jr. was wearing, the Louis Vuitton, there's more handbags on your jacket, son, than my wife has got in her wardrobe. As far as Louis Vuitton is concerned, my wife is a beast when it comes to buying these kind of stuff. Honestly, it's like money seems to be no object with the things that she buys. Chris Eubank Jr., credit to you, my man. You've got more handbags on your jacket for Louis Vuitton than my wife has got in her wardrobe. Big up. Now, although my wife will probably love it if she ever sees it. Now, one of the things that really piqued my ears was Chris Eubank Jr. He said that had it not been for the rehydration clause in this fight, this would be a public execution. And he's absolutely correct. He's absolutely correct. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there picking Conor Benn to win. I do have to ask the question, how many of those people who are picking Conor Benn to win is because you want Conor Benn to win rather than you actually believe Conor Benn is going to win? Now, makes no odds really, I suppose. Listen, it's an interesting fight. Conor Benn quite clearly believes in himself. Chris Eubank Jr., I do believe him when he says he is quite actually overlooking Conor Benn. He doesn't see anything in Conor Benn that's going to worry him. Stylistically, if Conor Benn fights the way that he normally does, this is bread and butter for Chris Eubank Jr. It is. And if Chris Eubank Jr. can cut out the showboating, he should, in theory, systematically take apart Conor Benn regardless of the weight limits. Chris Eubank Jr. moving down 3 pounds. Normally, he'd have to weigh in 160 pounds. Now he's going to have to weigh in no more than 157. So dropping 3 pounds. Listen, we don't know, and there haven't really been any kind of stories being put out about how Chris Eubank Jr. makes 160. We don't know. And now normally he'd come in between 158, 159, something like that. Or he certainly was in Cardiff when he fought Liam Williams. So it's not going to be a great drop, but the rehydration is really what's going to be the problem. So people who say that it's a disadvantage for Conor Benn moving up in weight, not really. 10 pounds, it's a fair bit. It is a fair bit, but it's not massive. It's not massive. And I know that I've made comparisons to Canelo and Amir Khan, and I've made Canelo, Triple G and Kell Brook. But of course, they're totally different. There was no rehydration clause for either fighters. So when you really look at this one, there is disadvantages to both fighters. There is. But ultimately, listen, it's a fight that boxing fans, especially older fans like myself, who will have nostalgia about their fathers, it is a generational fight from that perspective. But at the same time, these guys don't have any rivalry. They don't have that beef. But they did raise valid points, especially Chris Eubank Jr., where he said that his family, his father, Chris Eubank, holds a victory and a draw over Nigel Benn. The Benn family don't have a win in the column officially over the Eubanks. And that's true. Officially they don't. Although people like me, and I'm sure a lot of you who watched the second fight, do believe that Nigel Benn won that fight and it shouldn't have been a draw. But that said, officially, the Eubanks do have win over Benn, and Benn don't have a win over Eubank. He can't allow Conor Benn to get a win. So because that would give a win in the family of Benn over Eubank. He can't allow that. And he kind of put it down to that he can't allow Nigel Benn to get those extra couple of hours sleep because that's his revenge on the Eubanks if Conor Benn was to defeat him. And Chris Eubank is correct where he says if he loses to Conor Benn, it's career over. And it is career over. This is a win-win in some ways for Conor Benn, but it's a lose-lose for Chris Eubank Jr. Now, the only way Chris Eubank Jr., in my mind, and I'm sure a lot of you will agree, can come out of this smelling like roses is if he does what he's supposed to do, which is go in there and obliterate him. That's the only way he can come out of this. Within 3 or 4 rounds, obliterate him. If he goes the distance, and there are some swing rounds in this one, and close rounds, and rounds that Conor Benn clearly won, Chris Eubank Jr. does not come out of this smelling like roses. Whereas Conor Benn, he's not supposed to win this fight. He ain't supposed to. So if he loses, there's already built-in excuse. Not that he's going to make excuses, but the public will already make them for him. Now, if something goes drastically wrong, and things do go drastically wrong in many fights, especially when it's, well, not especially, but even when the fighters are evenly matched, when they're both in the same weight class, when they both have the same amount of experience and things like that, things do go horribly wrong. They do. Look at Chris Eubank Sr. versus Michael Watson. Look at Nigel Benn versus Jared McLennan. Look at Chris Eubank Jr. versus Nick Blackwell. Just to name 3 there, okay? If something was to go wrong, and Conor Benn is on the receiving end of that one, there's a lot of fingers pointing. A lot of fingers pointing at those who put this fight on. People will look back on it in hindsight and go, oh well, maybe this and maybe that. Well, it's too late now. It's too late. The fight's signed. Okay, and where the chips fall is where they're going to fall now. But it's interesting. It is interesting, and I do like the analogy, if you like, of Chris Eubank Jr., where he says he's going to hold the hand of Conor Benn. He's going to be like his father in this fight. He's going to walk Conor Benn up to the school gates, walk him through the gates, walk him through the door, sit him down in the classroom and give him a lesson that he'll never ever forget. And in theory, and on paper, that's exactly what should happen. But this is boxing, you never know. And that is one of the beauties about it, you never ever know. Now in the build up to Kell Brook and Triple G, I felt that Kell Brook had a chance in this fight. And for the first 3 rounds, it looked like he did. But again, this is a little bit different. This is a little bit different because obviously Chris Eubank Jr. isn't allowed to rehydrate the way that he would normally do it. And he put it down to he's going to walk into the ring at only 60%. And even at only 60%, he isn't going to have a problem with Conor Benn. He isn't going to have that problem. So anyway, we'll have to wait and see. I thought both guys handled themselves pretty well in this press conference. They did. Yeah, it's interesting. And I think a lot of people are going to be interested in this fight. I don't know what the price point is going to be for the pay-per-view. I really don't know. So I'm really going to have to make a decision a bit nearer the time on that one as to whether or not I want to be renewing my DAZN. And by the way, just to clarify, my whole previous video where I spoke about the DAZN pay-per-view and it's not what was promised us or anything like that, didn't have too much to do with Conor Benn and Nigel Benn fight. Sorry, Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. fight, my bad. It wasn't that, okay? It's about a whole great other things. Anyway, we'll have to wait and see how things pan out. I'm sure that the build-up to this one's going to get quite tasty. I'm surprised Chris Eubank Jr. held back as much as what he did. I really am. I quite honestly thought he was going to go in on Conor Benn and make it a lot more interesting. But I think he played the role quite well. He did. And me as a boxing fan, and me as a level-headed boxing fan, I like to think I am, at least anyway. Sometimes I do go off rails. But on paper, Chris Eubank Jr. should quite literally put on a public execution against Conor Benn. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see Conor Benn get hurt. I really don't, because I'm a massive fan of both of them. But anyway, that's my thoughts. You drop me yours. Click thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.